Okay, so what I was going to do today is just go over the qualifier one more time to make sure that anyone that was absent has access to what exactly we did together, as well as just to go over for everyone else exactly what needs to happen for this particular proficiency. So I'm using Rain, Rain, Go Away because it's one that we've already done, and it should be just a good little reminder for you. So hopefully in your own qualifier, you had things highlighted as you read through the story. Anytime you found a quote, anytime there was a word that you needed to know, you would have underlined it or just annotated off to the side, just like I have done here. Now, in class, we went over what it was that you're going to actually have to do for this particular proficiency. So to be proficient, you have to have a thematic topic sentence, which means you're going to use the name it, verb it, big picture strategy, and make sure that you include in the big picture the theme of the story. And remember to refer back to video 3.3 if you don't remember how to find theme. You're going to have body sentences that support the theme. That's using the jot-dot strategy. And then you'll have to have a conclusion sentence that tries to restate something about what your thesis is or the big picture. For mastery, you need to try and have at least one piece of textual support. So you're going to find a quote to stick into your writing, which I think that should be fairly easy because a lot of you did that for our first proficiency. So you're kind of already pretty good at it. To be an expert, you're going to need to do all of those things, but possibly 2 or more pieces of textual support or 2 or more quotes, and you're going to have to include the citation. So in your planner, right underneath the proficiency rubric, putting together the name it, verb it, big picture. So remember, the name it strategy is to at least identify what it is that you're actually reading. In this case, it's a short story called Rain, Rain, Go Away, and also give the author if it's listed. And in this case, the author is listed. It's Isaac Asimov. You're going to look for verbs that will work well for what it is this story is doing. I particularly liked the word explores. And then you have to think about the big picture. Now, sometimes this is hard to do right away. If you can't think of it right away, you could do your jot dots and then come back. But we talked about this in class, and we all suggested, based on our background historical context knowledge, that really what the author was trying to talk about was why it's important to question the world around you. The main character, Lillian, definitely notices some odd behavior, and she seeks to find the answers to what is happening. So ask questions and seeks the answers. So right down below that, you're going to write out the entire area topic sentence that you see from the name it, verb it, big picture, because that will become the first sentence of your paragraph, and it should be a thematic sentence. So the short story Rain, Rain, Go Away by Isaac Asimov explores the idea of why it is important to question the world around you. Being that this whole section here, let me grab my highlighter, this whole thing here is pretty much what you're saying is the theme or the big idea or big picture. As far as the jot dots are concerned, this is where you're going to go through the short story and pick out all of the important ideas from the story. Everyone's might be slightly different, and that's okay, as long as you're still keeping to the idea of, you know, your theme or your big picture. So most of the jot dots that I have down here are all kind of relying on or paying attention to the fact that I noticed that Lillian was really questioning the odd behavior of her neighbors. So I have Lillian spying on new neighbors. Secaros seem odd to Lillian. Secaros oddly fixated on weather. Remember, you're using the rule of 5 here, so you're going to try to not use more than 5 words on each line. So you don't need full, complete sentences. This is going to help you avoid plagiarizing the story. Okay, as far as quotes, you were supposed to go through the story and try to find at least a couple quotes that refer to your big idea. So I have one where Lillian is commenting about how they're always sunbathing, that they're so fixated on the weather, but they seem to like the sun and hate rain. So I think that this will work really well in my paragraph. I also have one here where I noticed that Lillian again is kind of questioning that they're really studying things. So I wrote down the quote, "At least I've watched the bundle the newsboy leaves. There isn't much you miss, is there?" So it's both Lillian and George talking about the fact that the Secaros pretty much subscribe to every newspaper that they can. And Lillian has noticed that the newsboy leaves a huge stack of newspapers for them. And then George is commenting on the fact that Lillian is just constantly spying on everything that they're doing. And then I have another one down here where it's the very last line of the story, made of sugar and afraid they would melt, because I think that might be a good wrap-up quote to add to the end of my paragraph. So we just talked about to put together our paragraph. So this whole section here, this becomes our very first sentence. So I'm going to write that down below here. Okay, so first sentence. In the short story, remember it's still a short story, not a whole novel, so we are going to maintain putting quotes around it. Rain, rain, go away by Isaac Asimov explores the idea of why it's important to question the world around you. Okay, so now this next part, this is where you're going to add in the rest of your summary about the story. So you're going to have to kind of go back and forth between your jot dots to write your sentences. So I've got a couple of sentences here where it talks about Lillian spying on the new neighbors and that the Sakaros seem really odd and fixated on the weather. So I need to make a sentence or two about that. So something like, and again, it's important that it flows and that it makes sense. So in the short story, Rain and Go Away by Isaac Asimov. Ooh, look, I forgot my, sorry, it's important to question the world around you. So now transition. Let's start with when the story first begins, we are introduced. It's important to remember academic language. So I'm going to say we are introduced to the two main characters of the story, George and Lillian Wright. I don't know if I want a period there, maybe a comma. Lillian is, let's do, instead of a comma, semicolon. Lillian is spying on the odd behavior of their new neighbors. Now again, I'm trying to incorporate several of the jot dots here. So spying new neighbors seem odd, Sakaros oddly fixated on the weather. So I have done, oops, let me move that. So I have done quite a few there, quite a few different things there. So I've kind of set it up here where I'm getting ready to insert my first quote. So remember, you don't want to leave a quote hanging. You kind of want to introduce it if at all possible, which is kind of what I've done here by saying the new neighbors seem to be fixated on the weather. So I'm going to add one of my quotes from up above where it says, there she is again, ... because I'm kind of taking out some of the parts of the quote. That's what the ellipses there are for. Sunbathing, period, always sunbathing. So now, the reason I'm including this is because it kind of shows that they're like soaking up the sun all the time, and then again Lillian's spying and kind of questioning what it is that they're doing. Now, I need to, in order to get a B, cite the information. So I'm going to put my quotation marks in to signal that that's the end of the quote, and then I'm going to pick up a parenthesis. I'm going to write the author's last name. You always want to use the author's last name unless the author isn't listed, in which case you would use the title of whatever it is that you're quoting. But we have the author's last name is Asimov, so we're going to do that. And then this came from page 2, so I'm going to include the page number. and then the in closing parentheses, and then the period at the end. So you'll notice that the quote is actually a part of the sentence. It's really important that the in-text citation remains a part of the sentence that you actually are quoting. Okay, so I'm finally finished writing the entire paragraph here. So we'll kind of go over it, and I want to just point out, based on the rubric here, it does ask that you have, in order to get an A, 2 or more textual support, a citation, and a conclusion sentence that restates your thesis. So just keep that in mind as I finish reading to you my entire paragraph here. So in the short story Rain, Rain, Go Away by Isaac Asimov explores the idea of why it's important to question the world around you. When the story first begins, we are introduced to the two main characters of the story, George and Lillian Wright. Lillian is spying on the odd behavior of their new neighbors. The new neighbors, the Sequeiros, seem fixated on the weather. There she is again, sunbathing, always sunbathing. The Sequeiros seem to love the sun and are fearful of the rain. In order to find out more, Lillian invites herself over to their house and notices that the house is extremely clean, and when she asks for a glass of water, she is so careful not to spill a drop. Before Lillian leaves, she invites the whole family to a carnival again to keep, I think I want to put like a little, where's my cursor? There. Again, to keep getting to know the Sequeiros. And then I want to say over here, let me invite stuff over to the house. When I want to say instead of she, because you get confused, I think. So I'm going to say Lillian asks for a glass of water. Mrs. Sequeiro. So it's important that you read through what you write and make sure that everything flows. So okay, so an effort to keep getting to know the Sequeiros. While they are at the fair, both George and Lillian notice that the Sequeiros are eating an abnormal amount of cotton candy. However, as some clouds start to appear in the sky, the Sequeiros are quick to anxiously ask to go home. While the Sequeiros are running to their front door to avoid being hit by the rain, the Wrights watch in horror as the Sequeiros literally melt like cotton candy to the ground. Lillian finishes the story with, made of sugar and afraid they would melt. So there is my second quote. Notice my citation there at the end of the sentence. In this instance, Lillian's questions about her odd neighbors hold true. They were aliens. This explains all of their odd behavior and proves how important it is to question the world around you. So here I have my conclusion sentence, right? But I'm noticing that I have odd and odd right here, which is obnoxious. So I think I want to change one of them. So we'll go back in here. Instead of odd, we'll say new, because they were new neighbors as well. So in this instance, Lillian's questions about her new neighbors hold true. They were aliens. This explains all their odd behavior and proves how important it is to question the world around you. Brilliant, done. So I'm thinking that I've done the best that I can to include everything that the rubric is asking of me, and I think this is a good quality paragraph. So hopefully that does give you a little bit of a recap of what the steps are to write out the paragraph for kind of providing a thematic summarization of a piece of fiction. Okay, thanks guys. I'll see you tomorrow.